Hey friends, it's Sarah from Sarah's Art Life. And I have just been so pleased to see so many beautiful pictures of pets resting during these past few weeks. I think they feel pretty comfortable that we're home at this point. And so as you can see here, my little old dachshund Sparky is resting comfortably. And he'll probably do this long enough for me to do a quick sketch. If I don't finish it all at once, I can always put my work down, walk away, and wait for him to assume this very same position in a few minutes or hours. So the project that we're going to do today might be a fun long-term project. My dog is still sleeping at my feet. And the reason why I want to paint my little dog is because my dog understands me. I suspect that your cat, your dog, or maybe even your turtle understands you. And right now, being able to reach out and touch those living, breathing beings in our household is just so important. Without touch, babies don't thrive, and neither do we, even if you are a bit introverted or not a touchy-feely person like me. Anyway, I thought we could draw our pets because they're here with us and they're probably sleeping a lot. They're giving themselves what they need. Maybe we can give ourselves what we need too. Sometimes these days I'm a little cranky. I know that's hard to believe, but I get pretty cranky. So when I get off center, when I move to the left or the right and I feel down or maybe a little too energized, I have to ask myself, what is it that I really need? Kind of like I would ask myself if I had a baby. The baby's probably hungry, thirsty, maybe needs a diaper change, maybe is overwrought and too tired, or maybe needs to get out and get some fresh air. Adults aren't all that different. And so I'm trying to give myself what I need. And I hope that you're giving yourself what you need today. Maybe what you need is to draw your pet. So let's get started. You can see my various and assorted supplies here. I'm going to be using a pencil, an eraser. I keep my sketchbook handy because while I'm showing it to you, it's something that I don't really have to show anybody. I can do whatever I want in it. I could throw it away. I can stick it in the cupboard, but it also provides a nice outlet for me. And while I love using words, as you can tell, I also, and maybe even more, love the visual. So keeping a visual sketchbook, diary, journal is important to me. So we'll draw, and then we'll have the opportunity to add color. I'd like to work with watercolor a little bit today, so if you have any watercolor in your house, maybe one of those Crayola kits that your kids have or had or that you got for a little project, bring that out. And we'll use paintbrushes, water, and a towel. You can use paper towels too. I find that I could go through so many paper towels in a painting session that I use a rag and just wash that in the washing machine with other rags after a few painting sessions. This way I don't use too much paper, and it's pretty convenient, especially when I go out and paint in plein air or outside somewhere. If you don't have paints, then we can draw together, we can ink together, and then we can color with crayons, pencils, or just leave it black and white, because black and white works just fine. We're going to start with the drawing, so we can definitely do this one together. Notice the line of his eye, the roundness of his body, his tail, his paw. He's tightened up his body a little bit, so I'm not seeing as much of his foot. I'll bet your cat looks like that too, maybe even a turtle, but see the lines, the ear, the shape of the ear, the edges. I shouldn't really say lines because it really is the edges. All right, let's go back to the drawing board. As I work here, I'm going to draw his shape. I recommend that you draw your sketch lightly so that you don't feel a need to erase, or if you do feel compelled to erase, then it's easy to do that. When we draw hard on the paper, it breaks down the grain of the paper and leaves a permanent indentation that can't really be erased. So here's my dog shape, and I'm going to be drawing this a little bit heavier than you would. Notice that I keep my hand moving. I do this because honestly, it's just a lot easier for me to get the shape I want if I'm not trying to draw it perfectly. For example, a circle. I could try to draw a circle precisely and it's never going to look right because I'm really concentrating on it. But if I sketch this, I can get this shape. So if you remember, Sparky the dachshund has his head right here. And he's got a snout or nose. It kind of looks like that. Are you beginning to see what I see? So that's the head end, and I'm not going to bother with ears just yet. Let me draw the tail or the rump end. Another oval. This would indicate the hip and his leg that's curled up under him and a paw. Now, that won't always look like that, but he happens to be very curled up right now. And he's got a tail. His tail is tucked right up into his body there. He's also got ears. So I will get this brush wet. I'll get my paints wet that I'm going to use. If you're using some of the dry pan paints that we have, that our kids have had, you'll definitely want to put a little water in it. Wait a minute, let it absorb some of that water, and it'll become easier to work with. So I've got a good bit of brown, and I might add a little bit of red. This is a more opaque red. That means you can't see through it, so I'll just use a tiny bit. And then I really like this yellowy yellow ochre. So I've got burnt umber, yellow ochre, and I think that they actually call that red. I think they call it an Indian red. And I may even bring in some ultramarine blue, which is a nice, warm, dark blue for my shadows. Okay, now I noticed that my dog's back is a darker color than his head. And under his leg, his hip, it's going to be darker. I'm going to probably end up moving some of this paint around, but it'll pool where I end up with my brush. And if I've got good paper, which is really something I haven't talked about much, but I do think it's important. It's really difficult to use printer paper to paint watercolor on. The substrate or surface on which we're painting or drawing is important. And for watercolor, you'll get really good results with a heavier paper. We're going to wait for this to dry. I'm going to add a little bit more of the other colors to it. But while we're waiting, let me show you some of the sketches I did. So just making the shapes with my watercolor and my brush and allowing the water to pool where it wants and dry gives me some idea as to what I might draw or paint. I'm going to take my pen out. I'm going to use a pen on this. This one doesn't look like my Sparky. To me, it looks more like a Siamese cat. So I might go ahead and put the cat's head there, its tail, its hind leg there. Maybe it's got its paw underneath its face. We've got a nice sketchy cat. Okay. You can see its head with one ear and another ear and its paw. Okay. Here's this one, looks more like my Sparky in the position he's in right now. So I may sketch around his little tiny tail, and he's got his hip. This to me looks like his nose tip. And maybe his head's in a slightly different position here. Ear, ear, his eye, his nose. His nose is a little like a beak. And his hip may come down here. And I noticed that his paw is right up in there. He's also got some rolls. Okay, so there's my ball of a dog. And maybe there's your ball of a cat. I'm going to add a little bit of color to this one now. He's got a little bit of red in his hind end. And maybe even his foot. He's got a little bit of red in his ears. And darker. And I may even put just at the tip of his nose because his muzzle's pretty gray. I may put a little bit in there, a little bit of color. And then there's that paw. All right. So that's my Sparky. And I'm going to work on him a little bit more when the paint is dry. You could see around him there's shadow, and I might draw him in his bed here and go ahead and put the ultramarine blue shadows in, maybe with a little bit of the brown. I'm going to add a little of my ultramarine. And notice I'm even going to put some in the body to indicate the shadows. It blends with the burnt umber, the dark brown that I used. I bet you his nose will look even more black. Maybe a little too much blue there. And you can see I'm just going to go ahead and draw his bed around him, or his blanket. I'll push some of the paint out of the way. I am not an expert watercolorist. I am not an expert drawer, sketcher, but I do enjoy it. I'll put a little bit of ochre in here, maybe some warm light around my dog. I could cut that out and make that a postcard. Could send it to my parents. They love dachshunds. You could send it to a friend. I do encourage you to share your work with people. Okay. Okay. Let me let that fully dry, and then I'll add a little bit of ink to harden it up and make it look more solid. Okay, my Sparky is dry, and I'm going to add some pen work to it. All right, so here we go, Sparky. We're going to finish you up before you decide it's time. I desperately want to start with his nose, but I'm going to restrain myself. So his hip and his little round back and his ears. Yeah. I noticed that it's all wrinkled and bent up here. And there's the shape of his head. I'm making this thicker and darker on the side that's pressing against his bed. And I notice I'm going to see his eye there. He happens to have little eyebrows. I'll bet your cat or your dog has eyebrows too. And then, of course, his little mouth. And we'll extend his little beaky nose out a little further. All right, so this is, he's got some long whiskers. And I'm going to draw his paw here because it's just, I think it's pretty fortunate and pretty cute that he's got his paw up like this. You can see that. Oh my gosh. I know the things that excite me. I don't know, maybe they excite you too. Maybe that's why you're here. And some of his chubby wrinkles, his safety padding. And we'll draw his hip, which is a bit extended. He's got that little nub of a backwards knee, his ankle. All right, and there's his, all right. I may put a little dark in here. All right. And now you'll see that since he's in his bed and I've got some darks and some lights, I can pretend that those are where all the wrinkles are. I don't have to draw it exactly as it appears. It can be an indication of what appears there. All right. I'm just gonna add a little to his head. I am terrible at finishing things. Not that I won't finish them, but I will just destroy it before I actually finish it because I'll overwork it. So I'm gonna try not to overwork things here. All right, so there's his leg, his tail, his foot, his little ears, his face, his nose, his jawline, his little eyebrows and whiskers. That's Sparky, friends. And like I said, you could have a cat or a dog or any pet will find a nice resting position and maybe allow you to love on it with your creativity. Well, thank you all for joining me this Sunday afternoon. I really appreciate your time. Even though we seem to have a lot of it on our hands, our time is really important. It remains important. And so do you. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Happy drawing.